People come to Lauriston for all different reasons. We have had people who have been related to people that lived here in the past, and that's always exciting when they come to get their stories. A lot of local people use the grounds. We have a lot of dog walkers. We're really just a little oasis in the northwest corner of Edinburgh. People who know about us like to come out and enjoy a bit of peace and quiet, particularly in places like the Japanese Garden. Lauriston Castle, as it stands today, was built mainly over 3 periods of time. The earliest part of the building is the tower house to the west side, and that dates back to 1593, built for Archibald Napier, father of John Napier. He invented logarithms, so that's who you've got to thank for all your maths homework. The next part of the building just joined on to that was built in the 1820s for Thomas Allen. Thomas was a banker. He owned the Caledonian Mercury newspaper, which went on to become the Scotsman, and he also was a very well-respected mineralogist. He was a friend of Sir Walter Scott as well. He was very jealous of Abbotsford, Sir Walter Scott's house, so he commissioned the architect William Byrne to add on a new extension to the old tower house, and that's the main part of the building dating back to the 1820s. The final part of the castle to be built was the area to the east with the library, and that was built in 1871 for Thomas McKnight Crawford. The final private owners of Lauriston were William and Margaret Reid, and also Margaret's brother William Barton. Mr. Reid purchased Lauriston right at the end of the year 1902, and he basically remodelled the whole of the inside of the building. His job was as a furniture maker. He owned Morrison & Co. cabinet makers, who had their headquarters in Edinburgh and branches in Glasgow and Manchester. And he also collected antiques and designed interiors. So what you see inside Lauriston today is very much his vision for Lauriston. The interiors all date from the first 10 years of the 20th century. One of Mr. Reid's most prized possessions was his table dating back to the 1590s. The top is Pietra Dura marble, which means it's inlaid with semi-precious stones. We think it was made in Rome, and he's so proud of the table he's given it pride of place right in the middle of his reception room where all his visitors will see it. One of Mr. Reid's favourite collections was his collection of Blue John. We've got over 80 pieces of Blue John throughout the castle, and it's something he was very proud of. Blue John is a type of fluorite that can only be found in Derbyshire. There's only one mine that still produces it today, and the pieces that you get out of that mine are very small now. They really only make jewellery out of it. The name Blue John has a couple of different origin stories that I've heard. The simplest is that the colour scheme goes from a kind of blue through to a kind of yellow. So if we say that in French, Bleu Jaune, Blue John. The other story that I've heard is where they found the seam of this mineral was very close to where they mined zinc oxide, which is black in colour when it comes out the ground, and the miners used to call it blackjack. So the idea is they started calling this Blue John to differentiate it from blackjack. The fireplace in the reception hall is also made of Italian marble, and it's one that meant a lot to Mr. and Mrs. Reid. They actually brought it from Mrs. Reid's parents' house in Glenorchy Terrace. That was the house that they got married in. The fireplace was in the drawing room in that house, and we like to think they got married in front of the fireplace, and it meant a lot to them. The ceiling in the drawing room is the original William Byrne ceiling from the 1820s, really as the centrepiece for a showroom. The drawing room would be used as your main entertainment room. The ladies would withdraw in there after dinner. and leave the gentlemen again in the dining room with their port and cigars. The ladies would go in there to have a good conversation, probably a bit more like gossip, maybe to listen to music, maybe to play cards, and the ceiling would definitely be a talking point in that room. The drawing room is decorated in the French style, which was seen as being very light, very airy, elegant. It was a very feminine style. You can contrast that with the dining room, which is in the Dutch style. It's much darker, much more stark, and the wood is much darker. The Reids collected pieces of art and furniture from all over the world. Their favourite places to collect things from would be France and the Netherlands, as well as Italy. Mrs. Reid was a patron of the Italian Society in Edinburgh, and she spoke fluent Italian, and we know they travelled to Italy on quite a few occasions. So there's influences from all over Europe in terms of the decoration. And even wider, a lot of the ceramics are Oriental in their beginnings. So we have Chinese and Japanese porcelain, which can be seen throughout all the rooms as well. The grand piano was a wedding present to Mrs. Reid from her brother in 1896. It's a Broadwood piano, and when he bought it, it was just plain. It didn't have any of the painted decoration on it. That was all added in 1903 when the piano was moved into this room, because you've got to have your grand piano matching your decor, obviously. Mr. Reid was a great fan of symmetry. Whenever he designed his rooms, they were all very symmetrical. If there was a door in one corner to allow you to go in and out the room, he would have to put a door in the opposite corner to balance it up. Sometimes those doors are useful cupboards, sometimes they're not. They're just false doors and there's just plain wall behind them. But going through most of the rooms, you will see more than one door in and out of them. And generally the second door is a false door. Mrs. Reid was so fond of the view in the sitting room that she placed her writing desk right in front of the windows. I'm not entirely sure how she got any writing done while she was sitting looking out of the windows. She would have used this to write her correspondence to all her many friends who lived abroad, as well as correspondence for the local church, Crammond Church, which they were very involved in, and for things like the Italian Society, which she represented as well. The calendar is dated at 1926 because that's the year that Mrs. Reid died and the house was gifted to the nation. The Reids didn't have any children, and they had decided quite early on, even while Mr. Barton was still alive, he died in 1911, that they were going to gift their collections to the nation along with the house. And that happened on the death of Mrs. Reid in 1926. In her will, she stated that it was for the education of the public taste in all time coming. So we like to think we keep contributing to that even 100 years on. We like to think that the house looks as if the Reids have just gone on holiday, and if they came back tomorrow they would be able to live here again. And there's little details like there's a chair in the drawing room which has a dent where people have been sitting on it, and it just looks as if they've literally just got up and left the room. Staff within the castle were led by the housekeeper. She was called Annie Mackay. Annie was born in the north of Scotland and moved down to Edinburgh looking for work in domestic service. Mrs. Mackay would have been helped in the house by a cook and 3 maids who lived in, and they would have had a laundry maid come in from the village maybe once or twice a week to help with laundry. And that would have been it for staff inside the castle. They would have had gardeners and seasonal workers working outside as well. The maids would work a long day. They would wake up round about 6 o'clock in the morning. They would set all the fires in the house if the Reids were going to want the fires on, and they would start making breakfast. one of the maids would help Mrs. Reid get up and dressed, and they would then set about doing the daily chores for the day. There may be brasses to be polished, there would be tabletops to be dusted, there would be rugs to be taken outside and bashed, and then breakfast, lunch and dinner would all need to be served and then cleared away and washed up afterwards. So it was often 10 o'clock at night before they actually finished their day's work. There is a tradition of the lady of the house receiving visitors in her bedroom in the mornings. Mrs. Reid could well have received visitors in the bedroom. There's 2 chairs by the fireplace for them to sit. She does have a writing desk in the bedroom as well. Bedroom wasn't really as private a space then as it tends to be today. It's decorated in very warm colours, and that's really just to try and improve the heat within the room. The bedroom has 2 external walls, so it does have potential to get quite cold, and I think the choice of colour was deliberate in there. The radiator in the bedroom is an original radiator from 1903 when the Reids had central heating put in the house. Now this radiator still works, you can feel quite a lot of heat coming off of it. It's quite unusual in that it sits up on a table, although in 1903 that was far more common than it would be today. It helps with the circulation of hot air. This is a very interesting piece of furniture. It's a very early Morrison & Co piece, and it's called a jockey stool or a weighing stool. You would sit on the leather part, and that makes a little counter move up and down, and wherever it comes to rest, it tells you how much you weigh. Now, it wasn't unusual to find these in the entrance halls of country houses, and we think that dates back to the time when, if you came to a country house for the weekend, you would quite often be assigned a horse to ride when you were here, and they would have to know what you weighed to know which horse would suit you best. However, country houses did keep weighing their guests right into the 20th century. So the Queen was still weighing her guests in the 1980s. They would weigh you when you arrived, and they would weigh you again as you were leaving. And if you've had a good host, you'll have put on weight. Lauriston sits within 30 acres of grounds, which were laid out pretty much as they are now by William Henry Playfair in the 1840s. The main addition since then is the Japanese garden, the Kyoto Friendship Garden, which was added in 2002. So it has its 25th anniversary coming up very soon. There were a couple of embellishments made to the castle in the 1840s by Andrew Rutherford. When he purchased Lauriston in 1842, he commissioned William Henry Playfair to add a couple of porticos onto the side of the castle, and also to lay out the gardens pretty much as they are at the moment. The Mermaid, which is now above the main entrance to Lauriston, is really part of Andrew Rutherford's coat of arms. As well as being Lord Advocate, he was Member of Parliament for the Port of Leith. So the Mermaid, with the motto above it, per mare per terris, by sea and by land, that's a representation of the Port of Leith for Andrew Rutherford. The lawns to the north of the castle have 3 croquet pitches on them, and they're looked after and played on by Edinburgh Croquet Club, who are a very hardy bunch, and you can see them out during most weathers enjoying a game of croquet in some beautiful surroundings. The Tower House would have been built here because of its view down the Firth of Forth. Tower houses were built mainly as defensive structures, and it would have had a really good view down the Forth so that you could see any troops who might be advancing up there. I'm sure when Mr. and Mrs. Reid first came here to view the house, one of the things that they fell in love with was the view out over the Forth. The dining room is one of the more dramatic rooms in the house. Because dinner would have been the main event of the evening, it would have been very dramatically lit. So it has this amazing lampshade that comes down right over the top of the table. The Reids were very early adopters of electricity, so the light emitted from light bulbs at that time wouldn't have been as bright as they are today. So they would probably need to have the light quite close to the table to see what they were eating as well. The decor of the dining room is really built around these wonderful Flemish 17th century tapestries. They were collected by the Reids particularly for the walls of this room, and they made sure that they were inset into oak panelling to try and show them off to their best. Now, when I say it like that, it sounds as if the tapestries should have fitted on the walls, but they didn't. They all actually came with floral borders on them that had to be cut off in order for them to fit on the walls. But even in those days, reduce, reuse, recycle, the bits that they cut off, they used to make pelmets over the curtains. So we've still got all the bits even if they're not attached. If it was just Mr. and Mrs. Reid and Mr. Barton having dinner, they would have eaten in the dining room, but they were quite well known for throwing dinner parties. It's quite a small table, so it would be quite intimate dinner parties that they did have. However, we do know that Mr. Reid commissioned Morrison & Co., his company, to make 4 extra leaves for the dining table, so it could sit up to 12 people if needed. There's an octagonal box, mahogany box, in the dining room. It dates back to the 18th century. It's Dutch, and it was originally made to hold 8 bottles of red wine plus a decanter. But Mr. Reid preferred champagne, so he had a zinc liner made for it so he could put ice in it to keep his champagne cold. The Reids did have screens in most of the rooms, and they would have used them to stop drafts coming in and out while they were in those rooms. But the one in the dining room harks back to the 18th century when the ladies would have left dinner and gone into the drawing room, leaving the gentlemen in the dining room with their port and cigars, having their very important business and political discussions. The curved wall here shows the dividing line between the 1593 Tower House and where the 1820s extension was added on. This wall would originally have been an external wall with a small spiral staircase inside it, and it just shows that William Burns' design was literally built on to the original Tower House, which still stands within the walls of the new castle. Mrs. Reid's family, the Bartons, their main business was sanitary ware making and plumbing. They all knew what was the most top of the range and the newest inventions when it came to bathrooms. So we've got a massive bath with its wooden cover on it because it's considered rude to show off the bottom of your bath. Both the Reids and the Bartons were self-made middle class. They didn't have a history of family portraits to put on the walls, so they collected mezzotint prints instead, and for some reason a lot of the portrait ones they've decided to put in the bathroom. I'm not entirely sure why. I'm sure it would make you feel quite uncomfortable having all these gentlemen watching you while you were going about your morning ablutions. The sink in the corner is all plumbed in as well. The lion's head in the bowl is where the water would actually come out, so that's like a mixer tap, and then the handles for shutting the water off are just above it. The Laird's lug hidden behind one of the window shutters in the oak room. Again, we're in the oldest part of the building, dating back to 1593. And this room, back in the 17th century, would have been the principal room in the Tower House. So if you're socialising, if you've got business meetings, this is the room that they would happen in. If you're throwing a party and you want to know what your guests actually think of you, you can disappear behind the window shutter up the stairs to a very small room which has a hole in the wall with a wooden peg in it. And if you take the peg out the hole, you can hear every word that's being said, so you can find out what your guests actually think of you. The library is the newest of the principal rooms, built in 1871 for Thomas McKnight Crawford. He was the owner of Lauriston just before Mr. and Mrs. Reid. Much as we would enjoy an evening in front of the television now, the Reids, if they had a quiet evening, would go down to their library and make their way through a lot of the library books. We have found some notations in some of the margins made by the Reids when they were reading the books, so they obviously read them in great detail. There's a vast array of books in the library. Topics go from politics to history. Mrs. Reid is known to have spoken 4 languages, so we have books in French and Italian that she would have read in the original language as well. The swinging bookcase doesn't really have any interesting stories of spying behind it. It wasn't actually installed until the 1930s when people started coming to Lauriston for tours. You would come in a door at the west side of the castle. The room at the bottom of the stairs was a waiting room, and then you were brought up the stairs through the bookcase and your tour started in the library. Before that time, when the Reids lived here, there was no swinging bookcase. That was just a solid wall. One of the most interesting objects in the library is the gentleman's reading chair. It's an 18th century piece made in Edinburgh, and it's made particularly for gentlemen reading. So you would sit on it with your stomach against the back of the chair and rest your book or your papers on the wooden shelf there. Ladies wouldn't be able to do that because they're obviously wearing their big skirts of the time, so they wouldn't be able to sit astride the chair. It's also got some handy little shelves in the arms that come out. All the information that we've got tell us that these were for pen and ink, but I can imagine a little glass of whiskey sitting in there of an evening. My main aim for Lauriston is to keep it as much as we can as the Reids intended, and to be as sustainable in doing that as we possibly can be. I would like people to be able to come to Lauriston, find out about life in Edwardian times, find out about the Reids because they were amazing people, and go away having been enriched by what they've seen and done here. Every year we welcome lots of school groups who come and learn about Edwardian life, come and learn about castles, and it's great to be able to be passing that on to the next generation as well, and I think we would like to continue doing that at Lauriston.